Hi everyone, this is Gary Wilson and welcome to tonight's live investor agent training webinar. And also welcome to those of you who've been through the Flipping for Profits training program and the Rental Profits training program. And most importantly, welcome to all the new folks. Again, this is now being recorded. It's a great time to ask any questions you have. If you're really new and you've just been given access to the member section where you have all of the recorded webinars on there, I highly encourage you to go back and look through ones based on subject matter that you'd like to focus in on. And particularly going back to the beginning of 2016, we started going through the material in chronological order. So beginning in late January, early February, we get into the marketing campaigns, and each session was devoted to a particular method or campaign. And of course, most of what you guys are in this for is the marketing. So I highly encourage you to look at what's out there. Again, you can download them. Once you have them, they're yours to keep forever. You've actually purchased them. So congratulations on that. In any case, tonight's subject is what do you do when you're building a team? All right. There's a lot of information out there related to this subject, and there's a lot of training material related to the subject. I like the Keller Williams training methodology when it comes to building a team. We're going to touch on that tonight, but more importantly, I'm going to go back to the beginning so you understand exactly what you're doing now when it comes to building, hiring the next person, what you can expect, what you should expect for the next move, and how you actually execute that move, and basically go over the structure. What does that structure actually look like? Okay, so we're going to go over that in detail tonight. Out of tonight's webinar, you're going to know exactly what to do. More importantly, you're going to know exactly what your next best step is. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in here. Let me reduce my panel. This is there's a website called Creately, all right, and you can see all kinds of org charts out there. This is a basic corporate, what I call a corporate org chart. Oops, excuse me. Let me go back up here. You can see in corporate America, and actually I think this can be expanded. Yes, it can. So let me do this. All right. Let's stop there. As you can see, director, that would be you, and this would say Rainmaker in it. Okay. And then each of these is a level of responsibility: manager 1, manager 2, manager 3, manager 4. And this is again generic. And then within each what I call line of business, you're going to have different people playing different roles. So this is the basic structure. The one I really like to show you is actually this one. Hang on one second. Team structure, but for some reason it hasn't been loading. I don't know why. We're gonna let that try to load while we move on to Roger's questions here. So hang on one second. So let's skip away from this while that's loading. Let's see what happens. And let's go to Roger's questions. So we're going to real quick while that's loading. Let me do a quick departure here. And this is from Roger Newell. Hi, Roger. So Roger's asking, just to test my understanding and practice with learning to read data from the websites that you provided. This info is from the census.gov site, which that's true. So that's partially true, Roger. It's mostly from Census, those planning commission websites. They also grab data from other sources, like your local county's property tax assessment database. And you're looking at Hackensack, New Jersey. Good idea, because that's a great area to invest in. And you're suggesting this is a great area for renters. And being that it's between 35 and 64% renters, I absolutely agree with you. That is a sweet spot for buying rental properties. Okay, so good idea there. Thus an ideal for marketing. To market for investing in rentals, absolutely. So when you create the booklet, for example, Roger, you would use samples of rental properties from that area, from Hackensack. They could be active, they could be sold, they could be, maybe they haven't sold in 5 years, but you've got the information on those sales. I highly encourage you to use that information. You always want to use factual information. And the other thing you added here is, you're absolutely right. Anytime you can be near hospital or university systems, those are ideal places to buy rentals. All right, so I do agree with your reading on this information. Okay, next, should I be looking at the MLS to seek out 2 family plus properties in the town to investigate? So what I would do, Roger, is this. start with your MLS. You can look at multi-units in Hackensack. Great place to start. But more importantly, I want you to go through Realist. You have Realist on your MLS system that allows you to access the county's property tax assessment database so that you can look for properties that may or may not be on the MLS. In fact, going forward, you're going to find probably half or better of all your transactions will be with properties that are not on the MLS. They're coming from other sources. Okay. So what I would do is I would go through a Realist and look for all the duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in Hackensack. You're likely to get several hundred, possibly thousands. What I would prefer you to do is actually narrow it down by zip code or school, actually you can't really use school district in New Jersey. I would use either town, a zip code, or the section field, which is what the builders, when building new construction, they use what's called the section field in New Jersey. That's what I would use. Okay. Now, all you're looking to do right now, Roger, is just to find out what's out there. And when you compare what's out there with what's on the MLS, you'll see a dramatic difference. In other words, there is a lot more properties out there that are actively listed on the MLS. It doesn't mean they're not for sale. All it means is they're not on the MLS. Okay. So once you get to that point, Roger, just shoot me a message, let me know, or give me a call, and we'll go to the next step. And for everybody on the webinar here, I want you to pay attention to this because it's really good news. You know how we have the community site, right? It's up and running. You guys should be going out to your profiles, updating your profiles, and notifying your investors, and also loading up any listings that you have on there. Number one. Number two is doing a search for going to the HUD Homes for Sale website. Look for HUD Homes for Sale, and you can put those properties out there. Okay, remember, HUD Homes, any agent can advertise any HUD listing. It doesn't matter if you're the listing agent or not, that they're open listings, and by law, any agent can advertise any HUD listing. So it's a great way to get exposure through that community site, which is loading up those HUD properties if you don't have any or many listings to begin with. But here's what I'm driving at. We're pretty close to signing an agreement where we can provide you guys access to every property in the country. Okay, I don't know that it'll work in Canada yet. We're still working on that right now. But at least in the U.S., every property is going to be at your disposal. Again, it doesn't matter if it's listed or not. We're talking every single property, at least in the United States and possibly Canada. What that means is we're going to be able to provide that to your investors. So we're going to do some marketing to drive investors to the site, particularly through the RIA groups, because I'm a member of RIA. All right, they're going to have only property data. They're going to have property data. You're going to have property data and ownership data. So what that means is your investors are going to find properties that they have an interest in, whether they're listed or not is immaterial. If they have a strong interest in a particular property or type of property, they're not going to have ownership information, so they're going to have to contact you for those properties in your area to make contact with the owners. That's why it's really critical for you to go ahead and make sure your profile on the community site is up and running and ready to rock and roll, because this may be happening probably by the end of September. We're that close. Okay. Okay, so back to Roger's email. Roger, that should help you with that. I've got another one from you here, but before I cover that one, let me do this. Let me bring over my question box and see if I got any additional questions. Let's see here. Roger's saying hi, and let's see. Roger says hi again. You're welcome. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. This is from Sherry. Sherry says, can we post other realtors' listings to find buyers as long as we have clearly indicated it's other realtors' listing? So Cheryl, the answer is a qualified yes. Other than HUD, yes, you can advertise other people's listings. However, you must get their permission first. And because it's in real estate, I highly encourage you to get that permission in writing. Just let them know. Say, hey, you're looking for buyers for their properties, and you'd like to put an ad for their property on a closed website that they don't have access to. The consumers do, but the agents don't, unless they're in the training program. Okay, and I used to do that a long time ago. I actually would go into a market center. I set up 11 teams at one point, and I would talk to everybody and say, look, many of you have listings, but you're not really doing much to promote them or advertise them. It takes time. I get it. You're hoping the phone will ring. I'm going to help your phone ring by putting ads out there with your properties. They're still your listings. I'm only going to get the buyer side. However, right now, if your property's sitting there, why not let me go ahead and advertise it, bring in some buyers, and help you get your property sold so that you can get the credit for it and get the commission. And I had always somewhere between, say, 12 and 15% of the agents agreed to let me do that. It was amazing. And I got a ton of business by doing that, by the way. So the answer, Cheryl, to your question is a qualified yes, and I hope that made sense, what I just described there. Let's see, this is Fassel. So what is community site and where do I find it? So you're going to get that Fassel from Beverly and Paul. And if you haven't already, let's see, tomorrow's the last day of the month. You should be getting that anytime now. There's going to be a link. In fact, Fassel, as soon as you get access to the membership site, from there is where you have access to the community site. So once you get access to the membership site, you know if you already have it. If you don't have it yet, it's because it's the end of the month and Paul has to get everybody on there from the month. That'll automatically give you access to the community site. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Awesome. Thanks. I was planning to post hot sheets. Great deals. Good job, Cheryl. Okay. Let's see. She sent me the email. We are good. Fassel. Okay, great. All right, so let me reduce my control panel, guys, and go back to Roger's second email. And Roger, we may not get to cover this all tonight because I want to get into team building, but let's at least get started here. Okay, I have a few questions on Module 2. I understand from other realtors that selling short sale and foreclosure properties can take over 120 days to close, but can also fall through. Is this different for anyone who intends to pay for the property in cash? Well, I wouldn't say so, Roger. However, when you're paying cash for foreclosures, you always get I would consider you're in a higher pecking order. The banks will tend to pay more attention to you because you are paying cash. However, when it comes to the legal end of things, you just can't speed up that process. It's just the way properties are hung up in sheriff sales, or hung up in clearing up clouds on title, and it doesn't matter if you're Gandhi or Mother Teresa and you're paying all cash. When you have a title issue that needs to be cleared, the attorneys are just going to it just has to follow a certain course of action. There's nothing you and I can do to change that. So the answer to your question is short sales particularly can take a while. Foreclosures, believe it or not, historically are easier to work with than short sales, pre-foreclosure that is, okay? Okay, let's see. In regards to obtaining the data to enter into such forms as the property or the opportunity evaluator, the property investment calculator, inspection analysis forms, cash flow analysis, where and how is the information found? Where first thing is, so Roger, when you're looking at, say, rental properties, you're going to notice on the MLS there's a lot of listings don't provide a lot of financial data. Some of them do, but they're putting it out there in the form of an attachment. So you have to get the attachment, and the attachment will give you the pro forma, which is the profit and loss or income expense statement. Okay, if you don't see it out there in any way, shape, and form on the MLS, and you have a strong interest in the property, you have to let the listing agent know that you have a strong interest in the property, but you and your client can't go any further until you have more information, like 3 years of rental history, 3 years of expenses, so forth and so on. So you have to get that from the listing agent if it's on the MLS. Now, if you're approaching owners directly through some of our marketing campaigns, then you directly have to get their information from the owner, okay? And really what you're looking for is the same information that's on Schedule E of their federal tax return. You don't want the return, you just want Schedule E, and that reflects profit and loss or income expense from the property, okay? So those are the sources of your data. Let's see, such such as individual costs for rehabs, expenses, finance, and insurance costs. Okay, now if you're talking about cost of rehab, that comes from your analysis on the property, or your clients, if they're going through the property in which they should, by the way, in person, and filling out the information sheets and the analysis sheets. And these are projections, by the way. So those projections go in those rehab sheets and information sheets. Okay, anything that's a known cost like insurance, taxes, water bill, sewage bill, garbage bill, those things, you can get those from prior history. But anything else that's a projection of future costs like rehab, that has to come from analysis of the property. Let's see. Furthermore, this information is supposed to be filled in and researched by the investor client, not me? Question mark. It's a team effort. So if you're working with an investor, Roger, and you're sending them listings, for example, they should be going through the listings to determine if they want to look at the property. Okay, that's not you. When they go through a property, say for flipping, and they're going to determine if they're going to flip the property, that's correct. Your client's going to fill in the forms. That's not you. Now, if you're working with a landlord and who's looking to buy rental properties, you actually do want to make sure that you have as much information as possible in advance. You're not going to be providing the information. Of course, that comes from the selling side, but you need to make sure that you can provide it to your client. So it's kind of a little bit of a different twist there. So let's see what's next here. To clarify my understanding of the MAO on buying properties, in simplicity, to arrive at an offer price to buy, would I just be looking at the average comps in the area for the intended property, then subtract out repair modeling costs, realtor commissions, lawyers' fees, and subtracting out 30% profit to arrive at my true MAO offer price? Partially true. So what you're looking for, Roger, is when you're looking to determine what we call ARV, which is after repair value, you do want to look at sales of properties in the area, basically comparable sales, or you're trying to determine fair market value. Okay. Now from that, you do subtract 30%. The 30% represents profit of 20% and expenses of 10%. Your expenses are your commission, carrying costs, and so forth, but not remodeling. Just the cost of sale, pretty much. That leaves you 70%. That 70% is what you need to purchase and remodel the property. Okay. So what we can do, Roger, is maybe, how about next week we go through some examples? How about that? But that should give you a pretty good primer on that. Okay, as well as seek to find a property to make an offer on that is little below the average comp. So, yeah, that's right. So you're looking in areas, in the case of flipping, that make sense for flipping. And in the case of rentals, you're looking in areas that make sense to buy rentals. All right, and from there, you want to search for properties that are not necessarily on the MLS. I mean, you can find some properties on the MLS, but the reality is it's inventory's tight, it's competitive. You're far better off using a marketing campaigns in Module 4 to help you locate inventory that's outside the MLS. Okay. Let's see. How does my client determine the market value to list price without MLS access to research? This is needed. So Roger, on the MLS, you're going to be setting up your clients on searches, and they're going to be receiving the listings from you automatically. It's all systematic. You set them up on a search, based on the criteria that makes sense for them, their area, the price range, what types of properties they're looking for. And as they receive those listings automatically, they're going to go through the listings themselves. So you're right, they don't have direct access to MLS, although many MLS systems now allow you to have a portal where your clients can modify their search criteria. A lot of the MLS systems do have that now. I'm not sure about your particular one in Handsacket. I'd have to look into it and see. But for the most part, you're providing the listings to your client, right? Let's see. The home path has an option for making an offer. If I give this to the client, yeah. And by the way, Roger, the reason I provided the 4 what I call quasi-government websites, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, et cetera, is because your clients are finding them themselves, and you need to know how they operate. So if your client calls you and says, or emails you, say, hey, I found this property on the VA website, what can you tell me about it? You need to know how that VA's website works and how that process works for properties to be put on the market for sale. And whether it's VA, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA, what have you. You just need to understand how it works. The reality is most of them, like in the case of HUD, for example, they do require you to go through an agent to purchase those properties. And all those properties eventually will make it onto the MLS system anyways, all right? Let's see. For the VA website, homes can be purchased from it without being a veteran. That's true. Now, sometimes they place a higher priority on veterans, Roger. What I mean by that is if you're a veteran or even active duty, they will give you precedence over non-military folks buying those properties. It's just like with HUD. HUD has a certain pecking order. A HUD home typically will be offered for nonprofit and government organizations to purchase the property. And then at that time period expires and the property is still available, then they will offer it to owner occupants. And then another 2 weeks goes by, for example, and if it's still available, then they will offer it to investors. Okay, that's the third step. So, in any case, let's do this. Let's go back to, well, it didn't load the team-based structure again. So let's go back to the original structure that I had up there, which is this one. Oops, here we go. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more detail, guys, on this whole concept of team building, okay? Let's see, hopefully this will let me scroll down. All right. Oh, there we go. Almost there, and there we go. Okay, let me, before I start in, let me check for questions again, guys. Hang on 1 second. Roger says, thank you. You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Roger. Okay. All right, first things first, guys. This is a very rudimentary org chart. I'm going to expand it just a wee little bit more. You can get the basic gist of it. And you can see, obviously, you don't have architects and analysts and developers and testers. But let me just describe one path for you, okay? This will make a lot more sense. All right? In any organization, when you first start off, when you're first getting into the business, there are multiple roles. So what I want you to think of here is, don't think of these as titles or even people. Think of them as roles. In fact, I highly encourage everyone here to read a book called The E-Myth, E as in elephant, dash, myth, M-Y-T-H, E-Myth, by Michael Gerber. It's the best book for folks like us, for entrepreneurs, to understand how to build a small organization. And every one of you is going to be doing that here eventually. We're going to start off with the team structure, okay? So initially, if you were to put, these would all be roles. Like this is, let's just slide this over so it'll make more sense here. Let me reduce this a wee little bit. Okay, so this could be buyer's agency, seller's agency, inside sales, outside sales, that kind of thing, or whatever you want to have here. That's more traditional view. In the beginning of your business, your name is going to be on all these roles, every single one. All right. So you might have marketing. One of these might be marketing. And in here you've got Craigslist advertising, Facebook advertising, letter campaigns, workshops, that kind of thing. All right. Generally speaking, what I like to do is I like to define the role and put the role in here. Okay. In the beginning, your name will be on all these roles. And obviously one thing that should be here is admin, administrative. So, and the reason I like to have that in there is because that's going to be your first hire. All right. So, in any case, let's start at the beginning. The basic theme is this. I want to find out from you guys, how many of you feel like you're really swamped, and boy, if you had somebody working for you, even just a couple hours a week, that you only had to pay, say, $5 an hour to, that you would actually do it. You could hire them 2 hours a week, cost you a whopping $10, and maybe they can fill out your paperwork on your offers. Maybe they can track if you have properties under contract, maybe they could track your inspections and appraisals and all that type of thing, right? Or if you're doing a lot of marketing, which you should be, a lot of advertising, maybe that person can place all of your Craigslist ads, for example. Okay. The bottom line is this: I want you to think in terms of what role or what roles do you have that can be routine in nature, can be easily identifiable, easily definable, and easily articulated. Okay. And you want to hire your first admin to do that. But the basic psychological requirement here is to be able to let go. You've got to be ready, willing, and able to let go of responsibility, but not control. In other words, you're giving responsibility at the task level. People are performing tasks for you, okay, and they're responsible for those tasks. You're giving the responsibility of that. You're delegating that to someone else. But you're not giving up control. That's a whole different story. You're never giving up control, in fact. You're only giving up responsibility and not control. So it's kind of a psychological shift, but it's critical. And the first step is always to hire a virtual assistant, which we went over last week. So if you're brand new and you weren't in the program or didn't listen to last week, I highly recommend you get that webinar from last week and at least download the audio and listen to it while you're driving. Okay. So admin is the first hire. All right. Now the second hire is typically going to be, in the world of real estate investors, is what I call a showing agent. Okay. So in other words, let's say this column here is buyer's agency. You might have a lead buyer's agent, and in here a bunch of showing agents. In the beginning, you'll just have showing agent. Okay. Now let me describe to you the difference between a buyer's agent and a showing agent. All right. In traditional real estate team models, like the ones we teach through Keller Williams, for traditional real estate, you're typically going to hire an admin person, and then you're going to hire a buyer's agent. That's your second hire. And you're going to have to split your commissions with the buyer's agent. They're going to get 50%. You're going to get 50%. That's, of course, you've got to still account for your the broker's percentage also, right? Now, a buyer's agent is great in their traditional sense when you're working with owner occupants. And the reason is that buyer's agent will take on the home buyer under their wing and maybe have to show them 30 or 50 properties. We don't know, right? The point is, a lot of these buyers are going to be looking, and may never buy, all right? So you want to have somebody who's willing to split the commission with you and take those risks, all right? That's traditional. Now let's look at the investor agent model. Same basic structure, but that role, instead of it saying buyer's agent, is going to say showing agent, okay? And here's what a showing agent does. A showing agent simply meets the consumer, your client, at the properties and lets them in the properties. That's really all they're doing. They're meeting them. Yes, they might be sharing the same vehicle as the client, either whether they are or they own it, aren't. It doesn't matter to me, whatever floats your boat. I used to do it both ways when I was doing that years ago. But the showing agent is not doing any other work other than showing the properties and helping the client go through, making sure they have access to the basement, to the attic, to the utility area, and so forth and so on. All right. But here's the big difference financially speaking. While with a traditional buyer's agent, you're splitting your commissions 50-50, with a showing agent, you're actually paying a per door fee. So you pay your showing agent a certain fee per door that they open up for the client. So let's say they're showing 6 properties and you're paying them $50 per door. That day of your showing agent showing properties to your client is going to cost you $300, okay? Now the reason that's important is this. When you go through the second module, you're going to see that there's a basically 12-step process that you go through with your flippers and a 12-step process you go through with your landlords. Once you master that process, whether it's you or your showing agent, is almost never going to look at more than an average of 6 properties at a time. You might look at 5, you might look at 7, the average is 6. But the point is, you're going to make an offer, sometimes 2 or 3 offers. okay, on those 6 properties. All right. And the reason is the method that we use is enabling you and your client to narrow your efforts down to specific properties, all right, that have this highest probability of turning a profit. So you're not looking at all these properties randomly. You're not going around trying to shoot flies with a shotgun, all right? You're only looking at the best of the best, not the most expensive, not the least expensive, only the properties that make the most sense for your clients, have the highest probability of turning a profit. So what that means is you're looking at fewer properties, okay? You're making more offers for fewer properties. The offer acceptance rate is greater than 2/3. So it's in your best interest to using a showing agent model when it comes to working with investors, because you're only looking at average of 6 properties. So you might spend $300, but then you, the rainmaker, keep all the commission. So let's say it's a $200,000 purchase. So you're getting 3% because you only did the buy side. Instead of you coughing up $3,000 to his buyer's agent and you keeping $3,000, you give the showing agent $300 and you keep $5,700. So I want you to think about that, what I just said there, because that is a critical difference between working with investors and working with owner occupants. Is the team model is the same model. It's just that you don't have a buyer's agent, you have a showing agent, and it's a lot less expensive for you to do that and a lot more profitable, okay? So that's the second hire. Now I'm going to go through these, and then we're going to go back and talk a little bit about how you actually identify the right people. All right. Another difference with an investor agent model is I know a lot of really good agents out there, particularly in KW, who have multiple teams like I did. At one point I had 11 teams. All right. There's guys that have as many as 7 teams. I don't know. I've never met anybody that had 11 teams like me. But the reality is they were always the same type of team performing the same functions, just in different locations, which is fine. Okay. But they're still only working with the owner occupant. What we like to do in the investor agent world is break our teams up by primary function. So in other words, now that we know this column right here might be your flipping team. In other words, you could have multiple teams, right? This could be your flipping team. This could be your landlord team, working with people who buy rentals. This could be your property management team if you have property management. This could be your owner occupant team if you still work with owner occupants, okay? Just to give you a rough idea. So if that's the case, you know, what I would look to do is, if I'm building a team for clients who want to flip homes, I'm going to look for somebody who has a strong interest in flipping themselves, or just really likes the flipping business. But more importantly, their disc profile might be more, they might have more D in it, okay, more D and more I, because they, you know, flipping tends to attract people that are more high D's and high I's, okay? The rental business tends to attract people who are more analytical. So in the rental team, the landlord team, you might have a team lead who has more C in their disc profile, more C and possibly some S, okay? They're more numbers oriented, not that the flippers aren't, it's just that the people who buy rentals tend to be more C types in that arena, okay? And then you might again have a rental team, and this person, definitely the team lead for the rental business, if you're representing landlords, representing landlords and property management, that person definitely needs to have a lot of S in them, a lot of S in their disc profile, okay? So in any case, you can see the flipping model, the people who fill those roles tend to be more like your traditional owner-occupant model. So these two teams over here, this team would be your owner-occupant model. This team would be your flipping model. Those two could even be interchangeable, okay? And think about it. A flip, once it's remodeled, is going to attract an owner-occupant, right? So you see how these two teams can work together? Okay, good. And by the way, can you see how these two teams work together? Your landlord team, people buying rentals, and your property management team, you know, those properties being managed. Can you see how those teams, you know, work hand in hand and work together? Awesome way to do your business. So, in any case, I'm going to do a quick little pause here because I want to go over something just briefly on compensation. We'll talk about compensation here in a minute, so hang on. when you're building a full-fledged team, let's say initially you have a showing agent over here. This is your flippers. You have a showing agent, okay? When that business grows and expands, all right, you're going to have multiple showing agents and probably, or more than likely, a flipping team leader who's really good with people, who has some management skills, and who's playing more of an inside position. When you get that big, this person, you are going to have to share commissions with them. They're not going to work for a per door fee. These guys all will be, all right? These guys are all going to be your $50 a door. But this person's going to be running the show. They're going to be scheduling all the appointments. They're going to be dealing more directly with the clients, reporting to you, okay? And so you better believe you're going to be sharing some commissions with them, all right? Same thing with let's say you have a full-fledged listing team over here, which you probably will eventually. You could eventually have 6 or 7 teams, right? In fact, the KW, the big picture is we want you to get to 7th level, okay? And you'll have multiple teams, and there's 7 levels. But let's say one of your teams is a listing team. That could be an offshoot of your flipping team, could be an offshoot of your owner-occupant team, could be a combined team that works with both of these teams. Okay, the listing team is strictly responsible for listing properties, doing all the paperwork, getting the signs up, doing the marketing and advertising in conjunction with your marketing team. Enough said on that. The point is, you're going to have a team lead. That they're going to have a listing team lead that's going to be managing the other people, and they're going to be reporting to you. And again, you're going to have to split your commissions with them. Okay. The good news is if you think about it, you as the rainmaker up here, now you're getting pieces of commissions from over here. You're getting pieces of commissions from over here. You're getting pieces of commissions from over here, and you're getting a portion of management fee from here. That's in a basic 4-team structure. All right. Now, I generally always like to have somebody working side by side with me. I would call like an executive assistant. Like over here would be your admin person, basic admin. Over here would be your executive assistant, and they're helping you manage all this stuff. That's a position you fill. It's sort of like having a vice president, okay, or a CEO. In other words, you're now the owner, and this person fills a CEO role, and they manage this whole thing, and you elevate you evolve or you levitate to the position of owner, and the owner doesn't work. The only thing the owner does is cash checks, make deposits and cash checks. That's ultimately where you want to be. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the hiring process. And before we do, let me slide this over and check for questions. Okay, let's see. Vassal, Cheryl, I do. Okay, Roger. Roger says, thus, the showing agent does not need to be licensed. Actually, Roger, they do. The showing agent does need to be licensed. And the reason why the showing agent model works so well is if you go into your office tomorrow and you've got 100 and some odd agents, ask the question, who here would like to make $50 per door, or make $300 in an afternoon, or make $300 in the morning? I guarantee you 60 to 80% of those people will raise their hands and jump at the chance, okay? But legally, they do have to have a license to open doors and to let consumers in those doors. Let's see, this is Fassel. Fassel says, I'm in the process of hiring a VA, but debating whether first task should be CMAs or a transaction coordinator. Hey, Fassel, let you and I talk about that when we meet. If you hire a virtual assistant in the Philippines, you might struggle if you have them do the transaction coordinator role. The reason is remember, they're halfway around the world, and everything they're going to be coordinating is going to be occurring on East Coast time for you because you're in New Jersey. So you're going to have inspectors and appraisals all working Monday through Friday 9 to 5, and that's when if you hire someone from the Philippines, they're going to be sleeping during that time frame. But they certainly can crank out CMAs. They can certainly crank out Craigslist ads, booklets, letters. They can do research for you on melissadata.com, on your school report, on planning commission websites. They can do Facebook posting, LinkedIn, Twitter. There's a number of things they can do. And I'm so glad, Faisal, that you're actually you're at that stage. That is awesome. Okay. So in any case, back to where I was. Where was I now? Okay, we're getting close to the end, so that's good. We're making good progress here. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to go out there and grab yourself a good DISC program. DISC is, D is driver, I is influencer, C is analytical, and S is supportive. KW, if we have one, we give you for free. Everybody took it when you first signed up with KW. You can ask your team leader if you can use that for your hiring process, and almost all of them will say yes. Okay. However, there is another version out there. It's from one of our favorite gurus. His name's Tony Robbins. Many of you have heard of him. If you go to TonyRobbins.com, he also will give you a free DISC profile that you can use when you're hiring people. So what you want to do is, even when you're hiring a virtual assistant from the Philippines, guys, always give them the DISC profile to fill out, because you want to make sure that they have the right DISC profile for the role that you're looking to fill. So if you're looking to have somebody do a lot of analytical work, a lot of detail work, you're definitely looking for somebody who's more like an S and C, more C so than probably even S. Okay. If you're looking for someone who's going to be out in the field with people, communicating with people, interacting with people, that person should have some I in them. If they're like buyer's agents or showing agents or a lead buyer's agent, that person should probably be like an IS. Okay. In the case of working with investors directly who are looking to analyze properties for flip or do due diligence on properties to buy as rentals, that person should probably have some C in them and possibly some D. That's what Gary Keller is, in fact. So what you don't want to do, guys, is you don't want to have a whole bunch of D's on your team. All right, you're the D. Typically, the rainmaker team leader is a high D. Not always, but typically. If you have too many high D's, that's driver personality, that's alpha type. People will leave because they want to go form their own team. You'll have a hard time keeping them on task over a long period of time. Nothing wrong with D's. I mean, we've all got some D in us. But remember, you're filling roles, and it's always in your best interest to have the right DISC profile filling those particular roles, right? So I like to use the Tony Robbins model myself. Obviously, the KW model works fine. I've used that a lot. All right. So you're going to be doing the DISC profile to check these people out and find out where they best fit. You might have a really super rock star that you had slated for a certain position, and you get their DISC profile results to find out they're really slated best suited for another area. Just do the switch. Don't question it. Just do it, because you don't want to force a round peg in a square hole. That person may last a short time, but they'll eventually will get frustrated and want to leave. Also, when you're forcing someone to operate outside their natural profile, they generally can do it for about a half hour, and then they start to lose effectiveness. So what that means is they'll be gung-ho for a half hour, and all of a sudden their mind will start to wander. They'll start daydreaming. They'll find themselves looking for other tasks to do. And if when I just described that, if you found yourself thinking, gee, that sounds like me sometimes, that's because you're trying to perform tasks that are outside your DISC profile. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just you're temporarily you're the square peg in a round hole. And now you know why that happens. So in any case, one of the best things about this, guys, is let me just throw this in there kind of as an aside. Once you do this the first time, like Faisal over in New Jersey, right? Once you get this going the first time, it is very easily duplicatable. We have a number of agents who've done this in their hometown, and then they also get a license in Florida, for example, because anybody who's, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, and east and south down to like Maryland or Virginia and over in Kentucky and West Virginia and all that, a lot of agents will actually get licensed in Florida too, because they're spending time down there. They're starting to travel there. They want to retire there. So you get your license down there, and once you set up your team in, let's think in Kentucky, for example, Yes, you can set up a team in Clearwater, Florida, Tampa, Florida, St. Pete, all good areas, right? And once you've done it the first time, it's very easily duplicatable. You've already got the systems in place. You can even leverage certain roles, certain functions. So think about this. Let's say you've got your virtual assistants on board doing all of your marketing for you, right? They're cranking out the emails, they're doing Facebook, they're doing Craigslist. You don't have to keep hiring that same person over and over again. You can have them add to their responsibilities, and that responsibility is them advertising in the other location, advertising in Florida too, right? So what I'm getting at is you can duplicate this process over and over again, and every time you do, you have certain leverage points like inside sales, background tasks, okay? A lot of those things can be done from a central location. They don't have to physically be in Florida or in New Jersey or in Kentucky. The ones who are required to be physically there are, of course, your showing agents, your lead buyer's agent, your lead listing agent, so forth and so on. Okay, property management, obviously that's geocentric or geographically bound. So, in any case, I just wanted you to keep that in mind, that everything you're doing now, I want you to do again in the future in another location, so that you can start to buy your freedom. That my ultimate goal is to have you guys buy your freedom here. Okay, this is Cheryl. Cheryl, this is actually Tony Robbins, so it's Tony. Robbins, I think it's with two B's. I could be wrong. It's been a while. So if you just Google Tony Robbins, Cheryl, you'll see him. He's a real big dude. Well, it was about, I don't know, 6'5" or something like that. Real big head and real powerful voice. And the guy's pretty much the universal rock star and motivational speaking. He actually owns like 12 different businesses. It's amazing. So, in any case, all right, let's wrap this up. I want to go back a little bit to some practical matters. Let's talk about compensation. All right, we discussed it briefly throughout tonight's webinar. Back in the beginning, we talked about showing agents earning $50 per door. Now, that $50 per door would work great in places like Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, San Francisco, LA, New York City, some of the higher priced areas. But if you're way out in Dayton, Ohio, let's see, I use Lexington, Kentucky, areas like that, parts of Tennessee, actually most parts of the country, in fact, you might be able to get away with a $25 per door, right? Price. I mean, if you can offer somebody, say, look, it's six houses, you make $150. How many people do you know right now would be willing to work a half a day for $150? So I would just want to remind you that everything is relative. The closer you are to the big metropolitan areas that are high priced, Washington, D.C. would be another one, you're going to have to probably pay $50 a door. But if you're not, if you're in Lynchburg, Virginia, or Columbia, South Carolina, you could probably pay $25 a door. All right. Right. Now, when it comes to your leads, your team leads, buyer's agent lead, listing agent lead, landlord lead, property manager lead, generally speaking, you're going to be splitting the income 50-50 with them. All right. Now, that's after the broker's split. So the broker takes their percentage, and then you guys split the remainder. All right. Also, you have to remember you have certain operating costs. So whatever operating costs have been required for these transactions, you've got to net those out too. So you net out all of your known fixed costs, the cost of doing the transaction, the cost of your broker's commission, any advertising costs, any other carrying costs. All those get deducted first. Pay that out of commission, and then the remainder is what's split between you and those team leads, okay? And there really is, I know everybody asks you, is there any other structure other than 50-50? And the answer is I haven't really seen one that works long term. We've tried a number of things over the years. We always go back to 50-50 because it's the only thing that people can't argue with. And I will tell you, as you grow, you will have people who will want more and more, and you'll find yourself in disagreements about compensation. So why not just go ahead and make it 50-50 right off the bat and eliminate your future headaches? Okay. Compensation. All right. Accountability. Obviously, as you evolve and grow, and you have people reporting to you, you're going to have to communicate with them on a regular basis. And what I generally like to do is start off each morning with an email letting people know on the team or teams what's going on, how many new clients we have in the last 24 hours, who they've been assigned to, what clients are actively in the process of spending money. They got the cash ready to rock and roll. We call that the money circle, versus those who are simply in the outer circle looking to do their due diligence and so forth and so on. So everybody knows every day who the new clients are and what position they're in. Also, we know what closings we have coming up. And in the case of property management, we know information there too as far as how many vacancies we have and so forth. Because every team's going to coordinate with each other, all right? But accountability is a big, big deal. And you want to have, as part of that meeting, in addition to that email every day, you want to have a weekly meeting. Sometimes it's bi-weekly. It just depends on your taste and the level of business you're at. But the weekly meetings, everybody's going to report how they did in the last week and what they're looking to produce in the next week, what their projections are for next week, okay? And you always want to come back and measure against those projections. So in other words, they report what they did last week. You as the rainmaker had their projections from the prior week. You're going to measure, you're going to compare actual results with projected results. And if there's a shortfall, you ask everybody, okay, if you were in my position, what would you do? And you get people to speak up and get themselves to be in a position to offer solutions. So instead of people always coming to you with problems and you provide all the solutions, you want to get them conditioned to think solution-based processing. You want to get them to think in terms of providing solutions, not just problems. So accountability is a big thing, guys. I know a lot of team leaders will do this for a while. They'll start to slack off on the accountability, and all of a sudden their productivity ceases to grow. And in business, I will tell you, if you're not growing, you're dying. There's no neutral. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. And I don't know about you, but I plan on moving forward until my last day. All right. So, in any case, the only way to accomplish that is to hold people accountable for what they said they're going to do, and that includes you, by the way. So, if you make a commitment to your team that you're going to bring in another 12 clients this week, or you're going to create another investor group in, Clifton, New Jersey, by golly, you should do that. You should do that what you say you're going to do. In other words, do what you say what you're going to do and do what you say. Okay, enough said about accountability. Here's the basic. When you get to this point, guys, and you're moving beyond hiring an admin person in your first showing agent, I want you to all take the Keller Williams Recruit Select process. There's a Recruit Select Lite, which is, I think, 1 day, and there's Recruit Select, which is a two-day class. And it goes into a lot more detail. It also talks about a measurement called the AVA, which is Activity Vector Analysis. It's like the DISC profile on steroids. You definitely want to do that. Now, let's say you do that, and now you're able to build your first team. When you look to expand and build your second team and third team and fourth team and so on, you then want to learn the whole process. It's basically recruit, select, active, train, lead, and motivate. All right. It's RS, TLM. So recruit, select, actively train, lead, motivate. And the reason is your role is going to evolve to more of a spiritual leader role, inspirational leadership role. And what that means is now you might have somebody who takes your role as a CEO, and you're basically the guru, the spiritual leader. Okay, when you get to 7 teams, you should be able to do that. But just write that down. Write down Recruit Select. It's not that expensive. I've been to a number of them. I've traveled to Syracuse, New York, and St. Louis, Missouri, to take those classes myself, and they're well worth it, especially if you're looking to expand your teams. Okay, let me check for questions here. Hang on 1 second, guys. Let's see. This is from Kelly. Hey, Kelly, how you doing? Kelly Boyd. Okay, 50/50. Do you pay license fees, etc.? I've done it both ways, Kelly. I would recommend this. In the beginning, if you're splitting your commissions 50/50 with somebody and you've already netted out expenses, like for advertising, and the brokers, Keller Williams takes their portion of 36% until you've done your international cap, and then you pay 30% until you've met your market center cap. I would have them pay their own fees and dues, absolutely. Now, I've toyed with it before, but the challenge is, Kelly, is with you paying all these fees for all these people, okay, and they don't produce, you're all of a sudden stuck with all this expense without the income to take care of it. So one of the things I do like to do is I like to hold people as accountable and responsible for their particular role, no matter what it is. And that includes everything. They're adults. They're not children. They're adults. And they got their license, by golly, and they wanted to be on your team, by golly. They need to pay their own dues. That's my personal position. I've seen it done both ways. I've done it both ways. I like to keep it clean and simple. I pay my dues. They pay their dues. Yes, we will subtract out known operating costs from a transaction, like, again, in the case of advertising, and then give the broker their part, and then we split the rest. That's how we do it. That seems to be the most favorable, common approach that seems to last the longest. So I hope that helps. Let's see. This is Fassel. Fassel says, if you don't mind, personal question, I was curious, did you give up your team's SOI? Yeah, what I did, Fassel, is I don't mind at all. I used to have my own brokerage company, and it kept me grounded. I was bound geographically. I couldn't really move about like I wanted to. My kids were getting older and going to college and getting married and things like that, and I wanted to travel. And I realized I don't care how high up you get, if you're involved with production, you're going to have a hard time traveling because your production is going to suffer. So what I did was I merged with Keller Williams, and I very quickly built 11 teams. In fact, I did it in 6 months. And I realized all of a sudden I'm right back where I started from. I'm making good money, but now I've got 11 teams scattered across multiple states and multiple MLS areas. And I was basically a workaholic. I went from the frying pan to the kettle, working like a maniac, trying to keep things going. So what I did was I was way beyond the 7th team. I was at 11. I turned it into referral business. I said, okay, you guys are going to, these are all referrals. I'm going to give you referrals. You're going to take the commission, and I'm going to take a referral fee. But FAFSA, what I didn't have anymore was all that management responsibility. I no longer had to have team meetings. I no longer had to do any of that administrative stuff because those guys are now responsible for their own transactions, okay? And my rule of thumb was this. I called it the bacon rule. You bring home the bacon, you get more bacon. In other words, if I give you a referral and you cash in on it and I get my referral fee, I'm going to give you more referrals. So that's what I did. I actually ended up making just as much money. Well, let me qualify that. Per transaction, obviously I made less money, but FAFSA, what it allowed me to do is focus solely on marketing. And I kept a couple of key people with me who were able to screen the leads for timing motivation and keep track of the virtual assistants, because I never dealt with a virtual assistant. As a matter of fact, I didn't even talk to them. So that's what I was able to do, lean and mean, and allowed me to travel, and more importantly, allowed me to help co-develop this training program. Of course, my role is that of the trainer. There's other people involved, which was my real passion. So now I get to travel all over KW, meet people, and train. I even give you guys referrals. At some point, you're likely to get referrals from us. But in any case, so sorry for the long answer, Fassel, but for me, it was more about my freedom. Money obviously is a motivator for everybody, but I have no more mortgages. I really have virtually almost no debt, quite frankly. And I'm able to take time wherever I travel and get to see and explore the place and discover a little bit about the place and meet people. And like you and me, Fossil, we'll go to lunch or something. Boy, if I was stuck in down in Virginia or out in Pittsburgh like I used to be, it would be very difficult for you and I to meet. So as you can imagine, I'm quite happy I'm able to do this. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And there were times I literally would be generating 100 or more referral commissions in a month. I mean, just imagine what that would be like if you had that kind of business going on. That's what it was like. So if you had 100 referrals coming in per month, you probably would likewise think, well, that's pretty good. I don't need to kill myself. And so that's what I did. I would love to see everybody here get to that point. I don't know that 7 teams will get you there, but I can tell you personally 11 teams will. So in any case, a lot less work, a lot more time. I get to see my family, and it's just a wonderful life. So in any case, guys, I'm starting to ramble. I did cover pretty much everything I wanted to go over. If you have any questions, please, now's the time to let me have them. Also, if you have a particular subject that you'd like to cover in future webinars, please email me like Roger did. Roger, that was a great pair of emails. I appreciate you doing that because otherwise I just go based on the feedback I'm getting from you guys on one-on-ones and teaching classes and so forth. And this was a no-brainer. It came up a lot. But going forward, let me know what you want to talk about, any subject you want to, and I will devote entire webinar to whatever subject you want. Okay, guys, I hope you have a wonderful evening, a beautiful week, and a beautiful weekend. And I'm going to tell you that the next webinar is going to be next Thursday. And again, I will be in Chester, New York, so I'll be doing that from not too far from the city. Next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. So thanks again, guys, for participating tonight. I hope this helps you a lot. I hope this shed a lot of light on it. Just remember, Creately, and you can go back and pull up the on your own, see if you can pull up the team model, this one right here, team-based structure, and that looks more like what we're talking about tonight. This basic team structure here, I used in early on because it came from the corporate world, and that's where I came from. That's why I chose that one initially. Okay, guys. Hope you have a wonderful night. We will see you next week. Keep knocking them dead out there. Congratulations to those of you who are really knocking it out of the park. I'm getting some really good text messages here lately this summer. It's very fulfilling. And God bless you in all your efforts. Okay, good night.